Hello, FlimsyLunchTray here, back with our How to Map series as we continue to look at the map Sleeping Giant for Tier 8 through Tier 10 ships. And today will be part 4, and in part 4 of each map, that means we'll be talking about cruisers, as last week we talked about battleships. So, and starting off today, we're going to be talking about cruiser positioning when it comes to the map Sleeping Giant. But again, as we talked about with battleships last week, this map really revolves around the positioning of your team as well as the positioning of the enemy team. As the map and the battle progresses, it's going to affect your positioning because certain positions on this map only work well for so long, dependent upon how your team positions and how the enemy team is positioned. So we're going to start down here on the south end of the map. We're going to first look at the green team. So this is a ranked format. You also, I think it is randoms, you can have like a circle here, a cap here, and a cap here. But then you can also have the 4 cap, where you have one here, one here, one here, and then one here. And then there's also, I don't know if this one actually also has standard mode where there's only 1 cap per team, but I think that's like so. So looking at the green team, let's talk about some positioning. So I keep discussing a lot, I referenced it in the battleship video, but this, let's change colors here. Let's just do yellow. But this kind of grid area, this is like camping cruiser land all through here. There's so many different angles that you, as a cruiser player, can utilize around these specific 5 islands in general. And you could also add in these here as well. But these are really key in how you can utilize your position. And I had some more interesting battles recently in randoms. I was playing with the Buffalo, and I got to kind of just test out using some different parts of these islands and how the enemy team had pushed, and it was really effective. So I'll discuss and share that here in a little bit. But a lot of significant cruiser play really happens along through here. The other really key area for the opposing flank, where you're looking at I don't know what to call this, the eye. This island is really, it's kind of comes down to, let's see, something like, as I draw these odd long rectangles, is really along these sides. That is until maybe you get inside the cap. But as a cruiser, you tend to be pretty conscious in how you push along here. Depending on how the enemy team is pushing. Because the challenge with this side of the flank is, for example, I'll tell you what happened to me not too long ago. I was in the Buffalo. I think I was in the randoms. I pushed down here to have a strong hold position, and I had a key, was it the key battleship and then the tier 8 battleship with me. I moved down here. The enemy team had 3 battleships pushing forward. They had a Bismarck, a Kansas, something else, and both my allied battleships just ditched me. And I was already in a forward positioning. So it was kind of like they were with me and all of a sudden they just ditched right as the enemy team revealed themselves. So it wasn't a really good position for me to get out of. So that makes it really difficult. So the more information you have really helps, because this can just be a really difficult flank to fight on as a cruiser if your battleships are not supporting you on the flank. At the same time, kind of underrated is also this island here. If you're able to sneak to it, let's say you start off. Let's say, just as an example from the green team, if you're able to kind of use it well, you can come around even the backside of this island, or even kind of turn in at an angle facing this way, and it's the same for the enemy team as well. You'll probably be going a little farther out, and I'll tell you kind of why that is. because if you just make a straight beeline for this cap as a cruiser, as you get to this position, the problem is any cruisers that are coming through, they're going to get your broadside. Even battleships, say if there's even a destroyer leading and this destroyer spots you first. So that's why usually there's kind of this more, if you want to utilize this island well, you have this more kind of out and then in fashion. Of course, if you have destroyer screening for you, it really helps. So yeah, so let's just talk more about, well, let's talk more about this before I get into more of the positioning per se. Because this really is positioning what we're talking about right now. At the same time, I tend to see this more in ranked per se than I do random battles, unless I see a smoke screen cruiser. Maybe pushing more up into this area, because sometimes you have your destroyer player, he just makes a beeline for the cap, like so, to get in. And then sometimes, like if I'm a cruiser, let's say I'm in this position, sometimes I like to try to shadow them for a bit, and then I kind of peel off here, waiting, in case there's like an enemy destroyer spot. So, you know, if I'm like something like the Minotaur, Neptune, or Wooster, you know, I have a pretty good high HE or HE DPM and Wooster, but AP DPM and like something like Neptune or Minotaur, I can effectively put fire to help secure my destroyer going inside. And then I might circle around something like this. Since I helped get him in, he holds the defensive position. Now it's more harder for the enemy cruiser destroyer player to get in. So you have that. That's usually where I only really see cruisers through here. Maybe till like the late game when there's less enemies on the map. Because the challenge is if you're a cruiser and you push up directly, kind of like this destroyer line, battleship players who are paying attention, as they come up this area, they can spam shots off onto you effectively. So really, if you are a cruiser and you decide to kind of maybe push up more like this, it's good to be under, you know, roughly the 10-kilometer detectability range per se. So I'm going to leave... yeah, I'll leave some of these things up for right now. So let's talk about cruiser positioning. So this first one I've kind of highlighted is, I don't see it very often. You can utilize it, specifically like in a ranked match. I would recommend, you know, more the first position is, oh, I gotta get rid of that one too. Oop. Draw that back. Where you might usually see more of these inside lines happening for yourself as a cruiser. Because what's really strong about this position here as a cruiser, let's say if you're a radar cruiser, you instantly have full radar coverage of the entire cap, which really helps and supports your team. If you have, say you have a destroyer kind of leading the charge, you're backing him up, or you broke off from your destroyer player after he maybe went in this way, then you can pop your radar. Because what's also nice is your radar is enough, it covers, let's say you come down this way, it covers, you know, a good bit down along the edge of this island, so you shouldn't be too surprised if you see something. Now, when I come up on the edges of the islands, what I'd recommend you to do is, unless you just no, it's not, unless you know what's going on here, you don't full send it. But what you do is as you come up here, you kind of decrease your speed, but you hug the island as you get up here. And so I might be getting to a quarter throttle by the time I get around, kind of like how this edge sticks out. Because when you're coming up here, and let's say you're able to use, like, I'll pop hydroacoustic search maybe somewhere around here if I have it on the cruiser. By the time you get up to here, if an enemy destroyer came and just dumps torps as he enters the cap, you're going to be able to see them. Because what is also, you know, this is a really high cruiser activity ground per se, along both sides of this cap. It's also a lot of destroyers, as they say they go into the cap, or maybe let's say a destroyer pulls out, they dump torpedoes along here because they know players like to hug the island as they come up. So that's just something you have to be conscious and mindful of. So let's say 1, This is, I don't know, call this alternative one. I don't see it happen all the time per se. Because what's nice is if the enemy team is really weak, let's say that they didn't really show up in numbers, or they're really behind, or the players just like they finally decide to move their ship a minute after the battle starts. If you're able to safely, without the least amount of risk as possible, if you're able to just pull into the cap, it's great because you can set yourself up in more defensive position once you get inside here, especially since along here there's no like low points in the island, the map, or along this island, so it's really hard to get shells through here unless you're something that has high arc, where, you know, like here you have this danger zone. Maybe I'll just put in orange so we can leave it up. Here you can be spotted, detected through, so that's something you have to be mindful of as a player when you're in this cap. But when you're able to set yourself up, and let's say even if you have hydroacoustic search and you're kind of parked here, or, you know, any of these other corners, then you can usually detect if there's a ship coming in on you. Like when I was here in a Cossack, a Bismarck coming up alongside with a hydroacoustic search, which I think was it like 5 or 6 kilometers on the Bismarck. I could be hydro detected, even though I was a Cossack's, you know, sitting here. It's not that I recommend sitting here as a destroyer. I just got hung up on the island and I couldn't get off. If any of you saw that in the February meme compilation, I believe it was. At the same time, you also have this option. You know, it could be even like these outside cruisers go to this position, and then, for example, then you could kind of come up like this. So this would also be another one position as a cruiser. The only thing, like, again, that's a risk of this position is if you're detected and battleships are paying attention to you over here. But we'll talk about how cruisers revolve around one another in this map. I don't want to spend too much time kind of talking about it up front, but we want to focus more on the map positioning. A super strong, I think it's the strongest positions for cruisers on Sleeping Giant, is just right down here. So let's say 1. Same for, you know, example for a red cruiser, about there. These are really strong positions as a cruiser, especially in the opening phases of the battle. What's so nice is that if the enemy team does push, because of how the island's slanted, you can just simply reverse and back off. But if you're, for example, this is one of my favorite positions as a cruiser to play, a radar cruiser to play. Because your radar can cover a significant, you know, it can reach all the way up. So if you're in, you know, the domination mode in random battles with, you know, this is a cap, your radar pretty much just covers this section here, because a lot of destroyers interact around these area with the islands that they can use for coverage. But when you're sitting here, because these islands are low enough, you know, you can easily spam shots and shells over. So really strong in how you're able to utilize these spots, because even if, as an example, I was in the Buffalo in a random battle. No, I think it was a ranked. I was here, and the enemy team was pushing really strongly along this flank, and they had pushed us back. Like I had the Massachusetts here, I think I had a destroyer somewhere here, another battleship sitting here. Eventually, they just deleted the Massachusetts next to me. But what I was able to do I was able to reverse all the way around to like this. Maybe it's a little further out, I need to say. So something like that. Because as the enemy team pushed up around here, there's kind of a low section on the island, like kind of here, roughly, that as long as you've kind of given yourself a little bit of a distance, as a cruiser sitting here, like something like the Buffalo, what I was doing, I could get shells still over the island. And, if they slowed down, then I didn't have to back all the way up. But as the enemy team kept pushing, I was able to utilize this position. And I was able to kind of continue to do this because there was no threat on this flank of me being shot or any battleship. I think there was maybe one cruiser, but he was way too far to do anything about it. But maybe he was already dead by that point in the match. But you can just utilize this island if the flank's being pushed. You can just reverse back to your advantage. Now this only works well when there is the out here is secure for yourself, because if you just I'm gonna do what Flimsy said and back out, and then there's a Yamato or Georgia or something just kind of like chilling over here, like, hey, a cruiser just backed out with no island cover, and then just able to delete. Because if this area over here is compromised, then as a cruiser player, what I would do is something like, back up, and then I would pull out and come back. You have to fall back and reposition. At the same time here, in utilizing this island, a player could do something like this, or you could do something like that. It's going to be the same for the red team. You could be coming like this, grab the cap, sit there, or you move over and set like that. Now, no, in random battles, like, you have kind of like, usually there's 3 spawning areas, like here, here, and here. So it could just be a simple, like, you're just coming down straight into said position. What's dangerous as a cruiser player when you're working along this outside flank is you don't want to be the first one to really... Now, maybe some people might not be happy with me when I say this. But what you don't want to be is you don't want to be the cruiser player in front of your team at the very start of the match just charging out in this area. Because, one, you don't have if you don't have a destroyer in front of you screening. I mean, if you have a destroyer moving along, like, oh, okay, I don't mind supporting him. But you really, if you're going to push out here in the beginning, you need to be able to have smoke. Or if you're, say, in a division with a destroyer who has a smoke screen, to be able to utilize that well. Because I see a lot of cruiser players who don't have patience in, let's say, the first 5 minutes, 6 minutes of the battle. And they just push past, kind of this yellow line here out into this area. And they end up taking a lot of damage or dying, or they realize, oh, shoot, I need to get back. And then they kind of like pull that maneuver where they show broadside to all the ships sitting here. And just gets dev struck. That's really bad. So until you feel like this flank, this outside flank has been resolved, then is it possible for you to push up out here? Typically, I don't like to be out this area unless I'm a smoke cruiser, or if I get in a sticky situation or something, I can just smoke up to help disengage or farm damage. And what's nice if you are in a smoke screen, if you have hydroacoustic search, so it kind of gives you heads up about possible torpedoes as well. But this area here is not the strong place for cruisers. It's like, do I have a really strong red? I don't know. Let's for the fun of it, let's just make it pink. How about that? But this area out here can really be the danger zone for cruisers. And so you have to be wary of this area as a cruiser, because if you notice, as I drew the beginning phases, we have this nice, this kind of yellow 3 boxes or sections, quadrants going on. This is where a lot of the strength happens as a cruiser player, because of how effectively you can use these islands on this flank. I was playing... It was a random battles match, and I was in a Buffalo, and I was sitting in the little bit forward position, and then I had a Petropavlovsk behind me. And we were just working together, utilizing our hydroacoustic search, not at the same time, using our radar, not at the same time, to be able to detect and cover destroyers moving up in this area, as well as, cruisers that might push up a little far too here, be able to spam shells, because again, like this part of the island is low, so it's easy to lob shells over. And then I was just in range, sitting in this position, because sometimes battleships like to kind of camp out here. But this island here, I should just leave this color up. This area is low enough that in a buffalo I could be sitting here and I could fire my HE shells over, and I was just trying to set fires on the enemy Yamato player sitting here. Because there was no need for the Yamato player to push out, but he was sitting here, and I kind of wasn't dealing with him at first because there's, you know, destroyers, there's cruisers to shoot at. But then once I felt it was good timing to start putting fires on him, then he realized his position was actually vulnerable. He wasn't safe sitting here because, one, he wasn't hugging the island. Even if he was, his superstructure is so high, I could still continue to, you know, set fires and aim on different parts of the ship. Or eventually it forced him to pull out and leave, and then eventually he just got burned down because of the amount of fires that were set on him. So as I've said, you know, with this map, as the battle progresses, you kind of get to understand, is it time for yourself as a cruiser to push up or not? You know, for example, that one battle where, you know, sitting here in Buffalo, had a Petropavlovsk with me. We sat here and just kind of worked, you know, we weren't sitting still the entire time. We kind of moved forward a little bit, moved back, tried to help throw some shells off. But we sat here in this position for, I think it was over 10 minutes at least, you know. So yeah, by the 18.5-minute mark, or maybe 19, you know, we were moving up into this position. And then we didn't really leave this position till less than maybe 10 minutes. Because we always had a target to fire at in between the different enemy ships that were appearing. And the same can be said, you know, utilize this information I'm saying. I'm not saying just for this flank, but it can be also utilized, you know, looking from the red team's perspective. Where as long as you have targets to shoot and the enemy team's not backing off, then you can just be patient and sit here. I mean, one of the biggest things that a lot of players struggle with in World of Warships is not having patience. And this is where, this island, or this position here and here, is where I see one of the biggest mistakes happen among cruiser players on this map. Let's pull up a different color. Let's go with orange because this applies for both. I will see cruiser players, I watch it all the time. Like, it seems like almost not every match, but at least every other match. I'll see a cruiser player who decides, you know, as the match starts, he doesn't want to sit here in this position. He moves up, maybe he slows down, and then he's like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing all the enemy ships now. And then, I need to get away. And then he shows this broadside to fall back. I see it happen on both flanks, right? Something like that. But what happens every time is, because you're showing all this broadside and you're a cruiser, maybe the destroyers haven't even been detected yet, maybe even the battleships haven't been detected yet, but because you decided to do this at the very beginning of the match, you get citadel, you get duff struck. You know, I've moved up along in I think it was a Neptune once. It was a ranked, so it wasn't as many enemy ships, and I'm kind of moved. I had a destroyer player I wanted to support. He was moving up to here to cap. I think was it to cap? No, he was just moving up, and the enemy team hadn't revealed themselves yet. And I'm like, oh, I feel comfortable to move up. I'll play aggressive. I want to test this out. And I moved up to here roughly, and I had the smoke because I was a Neptune, and I was mindful of, I think, was it 6.9 smoke fire penalty range on Neptune? I can't remember, something like that. Minotaurs is better. But there was an Agger that came out, and I had already dumped preemptive torpedoes down this avenue, and the Agger is like, oh, there's enemy team is prominent on this flank. I'm going to run away. And as he turned out broadside, we were all of the battleships, and I myself as a cruiser with my 4-second reload as a Neptune was just dumpstering him, and deleted him within like 20 seconds of him pulling out here. After he began to take some shells and shots and pulled out here. And then right as I killed him with my shells, my first wave of torpedoes arrived. And if that salvo didn't kill him, the torpedoes I fired preemptively would have killed him. And so if I'm in a cruiser that has, you know, the Neptune Minotaur, you know, those have, I think it's a 10-kilometer range on the torps. If I'm able to utilize it well, then I'll, even as a destroyer, I always dump torpedoes down this flank in the beginning. I've got some surprise kills just by doing that. Because players, especially cruiser players, can be unconfident when they move up this position, where they think, oh, I can't use the S key. I can only use the W, A, or D key. I mean, going left or right or forward. They don't think of going reverse. Or if the aggro player would have just reversed and backed off, he would have been fine. So don't freak out. Like, that's a pre-decision you have to make. If the enemy team is prominent, if I move up to this flank and they're really pushing, then I'm just going to reverse alongside the island. There's no need for me to pull out and do this. But I see cruiser players repeatedly all the time on Sleeping Giant pull this maneuver and do a lot of damage. I'll even see battleships do something similar. Maybe they do it a little further back. So just be mindful of that as a cruiser player. You have these islands as a reason. And being able to camp and use them to your advantage, where you're mitigating, taking fire from the enemy team, you're mitigating, because one of the biggest things in World of Warships too, with your positioning, when you engage enemy targets, you want to have the least amount of enemy ships having a fire solution on you is the best. So you really want to try to have like one-on-one engagements, not like 1-on-3 engagements. So as much as you can do that to favor yourself, the better. Because even when you are in this position, it's hard for destroyers to dump torpedoes on you because of these 4 islands kind of sitting here. A destroyer player just can't sneak out and then dump a bunch of torpedoes. If they want to do that, they have to go out into this area, get past these islands to effectively put torpedoes in on this flank. So if this area's you don't have any destroyer screening out here, and you know there's a destroyer out somewhere, you haven't spotted them yet, you know, there could be possibilities dumping torpedoes in on you in these locations. Let's see, there is a player, I don't remember his name, the Sailing Rowden. He's one of my favorite World of Warships YouTube content creators. And if he's able to, what he actually likes to do in something like, I think his example, he showcases this, I think, in the Des Moines. He likes to actually push up beyond this point. So let's switch to a greener color. And he likes to sit in here. Because if he can utilize this island well enough, he can fire shells over it without the enemy being able to really put effective fire on him. And then he also prevents any sneaky plays happening down here. And he can also put fire across the map. Say it's a destroyer or a cruiser is pushing down in this area. He can punish them. It'd be the same if it was something like this, just vice versa. Just the only thing you have to be conscious of is knowing how close you are to the island, so that you don't get dumpstered by, let's say, a battleship out here on this flank. So this is really the opening positions of the game when you're in a cruiser. And then this is just the starting point. And then as enemy team, let's say your team wins this flank, then you're able to push up further. So if my team wins the flank as a cruiser player, I'll move along here and kind of hug, going up, pushing up this way. The only thing you have to be mindful of is if you're doing this, if you're detected, let's say there's something like a battleship or cruiser player enemy catches you doing this maneuver. I mean, this is also if you're going down south as well. Keep that in mind. You can just get dumpstered. Funny enough, I was in, again, the Buffalo. I keep saying Buffalo a lot because I was grinding the Buffalo and I just got the Des Moines yesterday as I record this video. And I was here and I was undetected. And there was an enemy Alaska that was pushing out here, and then there was I think it was a Georgia here. And no, he was more this way, but his guns were focused, I think, off to this way or something. But I was going to make a break across. I wanted to get from here to here and get a salvo off. But as I was about to break free of the island, I think there was an enemy ship that put up a spotter plane or fighter plane, and it detected me. So I lost my element of surprise, but if I slammed the brakes, it was too late. I just would have stopped like fully broadside right there. But the Alaska player was paying attention, and he just turned his turrets on me, and one salvo completely dev struck me, took all of my health pool. moving up. And that was also because our team was just losing map control. Like our team over here got deleted, and then they were pushing in behind us. So I was kind of either get chewed up from behind or try to make a play going up front. So that was my attempt at making a play go up front, and I was caught off guard. I got outplayed in doing that. So you just have to be mindful of what's going on out here, whether it's favorable for you or not to push out this way as a cruiser. Yeah, so just keep that in mind. So the biggest thing with this map is just paying attention to what is happening, even on your mini map. For those of you who don't pay attention to it, it's right here when you're playing the game. You can enlarge it and make it even bigger. You can make it more transparent where you can see through it, or more bold where you can't see through it at all. And you need to be paying attention to it because it's just a mini version of the map, and it's going to tell you so much information on how the enemy team is moving and give you the best play possible and making winning decisions. Just because of how much this map it's almost like a life symbiote because of how it fluctuates with your team's positioning, the enemy team positioning, that you just have to be mindful of what's going on. And okay, how long has it been since that cruiser was last detected? How long has it been since that destroyer was last detected? Playing off of that. So I want to try to go ahead and wrap this up real quick and talking about how cruisers interact with enemy ships classes on the map, or just classes in general. One of the downsides, if you have aircraft carriers in this match, or this map, if you're sitting here in one of these positions, a aircraft carrier, let's say you're sitting here, he can just fly his squadron, kind of over these islands. And then let's say something like a German aircraft carrier, and just drop those armor-piercing dive bombers. It can do a lot of damage on you. So that's just something that's a risk if a carrier player is aware enough to know what is happening and how cruisers are positioning and how you can take advantage of it. They'll play off that. It's harder for a aircraft carrier player, let's say if he has torpedo bombers, for him to fly out and then fly in on you. That's a really dramatic example. They have a much better turning circle than that. But let's say something kind of like this, just because they end up usually taking a lot of AA flak from the enemy team. But an aware CV player can really do a lot of damage to a cruiser player sitting in this type of position. Especially if you're singled out here on the flank, and especially if you overextend as a cruiser player. The carrier player is going to go for you because you're isolated and alone, or at least a good CV player will, in my opinion. So you just have to be mindful because a carrier player can just kind of fly over the island, surprise spot you. And so that's one of the difficulties with this map, especially if you get into this area and there's a carrier just sitting out here, flies his planes on you, keeps bombing you, keeps rocket attacking, using rockets and attacking you. That can really chip away a lot at your health pool, and then you become more distracted about a carrier versus planes in the sky versus what's happening on the surface of the water. So just be mindful of that. But the advantage is when you're in here, there's only two ways an enemy ship can come in on you, except planes. They can come over wherever they want, in whatever direction on you. So yeah, battleships, you just have to be kind of aware, kind of like what I was saying, watching if they have potential cross fire shots on you across the map. You just have to be mindful with your side. If you extend out too far, if you're not hugging an island enough, which is really important. I know some players are really accusatory of other cruiser players, just a bunch of camping cruisers, island hugging cruisers. Well, that's kind of how cruisers really work well in the game. For those that don't have a smoke screen, where you need the island to help your survivability and living in the game longer. Because like any ship in the game, a ship still alive in the last half of the match is much more deadly than the first half. And that is really true of destroyers. Really true of destroyers. So just be mindful. Look at your mini-map. Look around while you're waiting on your reload. Kind of like, hey, where's the enemy battleship's positioning? Do they have a good shot on me? Because you think you might be safe, and then you'll be surprised to find out a position that you thought was safe as you move up here is not safe because of a battleship moving positions in on you. Because something like the Yamato Musashi, because they have such large shells, it can do a lot of damage to your stern. You know, say if you're something like an Des Moines, Buffalo, you know, you have a 27 millimeter bow, and you're not really going to be deflecting that so well. Unlike something perhaps more like a Moskva, Petropavlovsk, you know, something that's got that icebreaker bow on the front to help better take and deflect that damage. So just be mindful of that. That's usually where I see a lot of cruiser players not do well on Sleeping Giant, is they're just unaware of where the enemy battleship is positioned, and they get surprised by a cross shot. Cruisers, we've pretty much discussed that. If you know, you have these island positionings to utilize as a cruiser player, and then cruisers who are more open gunboating, going out here, let's say in this danger zone, could be more at risk, especially if they don't have a smoke screen, they don't have good concealment. Usually the cruiser players who kind of yellow at the beginning of a match on Sleeping Giant are usually the first ones to die, because they overextend where really, let's see, is a good color to use. And blue. This kind of is like, think of this area kind of like as a fortress, where if you move and overextend too much and the enemy team's paying attention, they just delete you when you leave the fort area. So this is a really stronghold between these two islands and how you can utilize them, especially also for the fact that as a cruiser, let's say something like the Worcester, here, this island's lower in certain parts than actually what this island is. So as a Worcester, you know, you can move up and get some effective HE shells flying over on, let's say, enemy targets sitting here. Or if, you know, you're something like the Minotaur, you can smoke up. So utilizing these islands as well. So just keep in mind that some cruisers like to do that. But it's important to note that don't overextend in the beginning of the battle when you are a cruiser on this flank particularly. And this one you just have to fill out to see how is the enemy team moving and how are they positioning. In regards to destroyers, we did talk about how there can be, this is a very torpedo savvy alley. I don't know what's a good color. I guess I'll just use blue again. There's often, well, actually blue is bad because this is, the ocean is blue. We'll use pink, and then I'll just kind of erase that. This is a torpedo alley through here. This is a torpedo alley. This is a torpedo alley. And then if a destroyer player gets out far enough, this can become a torpedo alley. So you just have to be mindful and aware of where the destroyers are moving around on the map. Some destroyers like to try to get in to this area and spout off torpedoes, but again, because these islands sitting here, they can't necessarily just torpedo. It's really hard for them to get torpedoes off through here because they basically have to expose themselves, or it might be more easy for them to be detected. So those are really the torpedo alleys you have to watch. If you're dealing with a more gunboaty destroyer, you know, they like to utilize these islands to get behind, throw a lot of HE spam over, and even if you are a radar cruiser in these positions, and as a destroyer moves up to here, you radar, your team doesn't have a good firing solution on him because he hugs these islands until your radar goes off from cooldown. They can still sometimes get good HE fire over the islands and on you. Another troublesome area that can be, this happens not so much towards, it can happen at the beginning of the battle, but I see it more to happen towards the last half of the battle, is this area here. Becomes a more highly contested destroyer area. Actually, I need to extend that more. Because a destroyer with his concealment, it can just, you could be sitting here as a cruiser, and then all of a sudden, bam, as a destroyer pops in through the islands here on you. Maybe just torpedo rush you. And so that has to be something you're aware, or maybe they're moving along the backside because they want to get into your cap. You know, as an example, this is a ranked battle. So this can become more deadly as the game progresses if there's a destroyer player and you're unable to check him, especially if you're a battleship player and you don't have any cruisers or destroyers really screening for you over here, but you know those, you're detected, and you know the last time that there's no other destroyers up here, but there was one over here 3 minutes ago. Now he's repositioned to move in on you over here. That's just something you have to be mindful of, because these this area here is, and this area can be a really breakout zone in between. It's like, this is like its own map over here, and then like the rest of this is like its own map over here, almost, to a certain extent, because it's like you're entering and leaving here. Effective players on this map know that it's not just this area and it's not just this area, but that they're paying attention to what's happening on both sides at the same time. That's really what helps set players apart from other players in this battle, in this match on Sleeping Giant. So be mindful of the torpedo alleys, because that can really do a number on you if you're not paying attention. So I think we should go ahead and close up there. I really hope this helps you as a cruiser player, as a player in general in World of Warships, to utilize Sleeping Giant more. It'll be good to talk about destroyers next week. But for now, just try to use the camping island meta to your strength. Experiment, test different things out with this map, especially with these positions I've highlighted as a cruiser player, because that will really help your game, improve your gameplay. Especially don't do that turnout maneuver I was talking about. That kills a lot of cruiser players. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you want to see more. And if you have subscribed, thanks so much, as we're just about to break through to 200 subscribers. So really awesome and really thankful. So until next time, take care.